Come with me out to the barn on a morning in January. The ground outside is frozen hard as iron, and there is not one green thing growing from here to the county line. The pasture is brown and dead under a crust of old snow. The garden is put to bed until April. And yet here on this workbench, under nothing but the plain daylight coming through that one dusty window, I have a tray of grass. Thick, living green grass, 6 inches tall, the roots knit together so tight you can lift the whole thing out in one piece and roll it up like a little green rug. My goats will eat it down to nothing in about 4 minutes, and they will shove each other aside to get at it. And I planted that grass just 7 days ago. No field, no soil, no sunshine to speak of, just a scoop of grain, a little water, and 7 days of doing almost nothing. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish, and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My family has kept animals on this ground for the better part of 200 years through good summers and hard winters. And one of the oldest troubles a man who keeps animals ever faces is this. In the green months, the good Lord grows their feed for free. The grass comes up, the animals graze, and everyone is fat and happy. But then the cold comes, the green dies back, and from about November to April, you are hauling out dry hay and buying bag after bag of feed from the mill, and you are watching your animals go dull in the coat and slow in the egg because there is not a fresh green thing in their diet for 5 months of the year. Today, I'm going to show you the old way around that. It is called fodder, sprouted grain fodder, and it is nothing more than taking ordinary feed grain and sprouting it into a thick mat of fresh green feed in about a week, right there on a shelf in your barn, your shed, or your spare room. It takes no land at all. It takes no soil at all. And here's the part that surprises folks the most. It takes almost no sun. It will grow green in a dim corner where you could barely read a newspaper. I'm going to show you exactly what grain to use, how to soak it, how to rinse it, how to keep the mold away, which is the one thing that trips up nearly everybody the first time. And I am going to be honest with you at the end about what this feed can do and what it cannot, because there is a great deal of foolishness told about fodder on the internet, and I would rather you trust me than be dazzled by me. Stay with me. Let me start with the plain wonder of the thing, the multiplication, because once you see the numbers, you will understand why folks have been doing this for a very long time. You take 1 pound of dry grain, just 1 pound, a couple of scoops, you soak it and you sprout it, and in 6 or 7 days, that 1 pound of hard, dry seed becomes 6, 7, sometimes 8 pounds of fresh green fodder. It swells and it sprouts and it grows and it drinks up water and light, and it turns itself from a fistful of dry kernels into a heavy green mat as thick as the sod in your yard. 1 pound in, 6 or 7 pounds out. Now, I will be honest with you in a moment about what that multiplication really is, because a good deal of that new weight is water, and I will not let you believe you are making something out of nothing. But even told honest, it is a marvel. You are taking cheap dry grain and turning it into fresh living green feed in the dead of winter on a shelf with no field and no sun. Now let me tell you why an animal wants this so badly, because it is more than just that it is green. When a seed sprouts, it wakes up. A dry kernel of grain is a sleeping thing locked up tight, and a fair bit of what is in it is hard for an animal to get at. But the moment that seed soaks up water and begins to sprout, it comes alive and it starts changing itself for its own growth. The hard starches begin turning into simpler sugars the animal can use easily. Vitamins that were barely there in the dry seed multiply many times over as it greens up. The vitamins of fresh growth, the very ones your animals go short on all winter, enzymes wake up. The whole thing becomes softer, sweeter, wetter, and far easier for a belly to digest than the hard, dry grain it came from. That is why a hen who turns her beak up at a little dry scratch will run clear across the yard for a flake of fresh fodder. It is not just feed to her. It is spring in the middle of January. Now, what grain do you use? This matters, so listen close. The king of fodder grain, the one nearly every serious body settles on in the end, is barley. Plain feed barley, the kind you can buy by the bag at any feed mill or farm store for a modest price. Barley is the king for 3 good reasons. It sprouts fast and it sprouts reliable. A good bag of barley will have nearly every kernel come to life. It grows a thick, heavy mat, and it gives you the best balance of grass and root of any of them. If you do nothing else I say today, get barley and you will not go wrong. But barley is not the only one. Wheat works, and it is often cheaper and easier to find. Wheat sprouts quick and grows a fine fodder, a touch less than barley, but close. Oats will sprout, though whole oats with the hull on can be slower and a little fussier. So if you use oats, use them knowing they take a gentler hand. Grain sorghum, what some call Milo, works in the warm months. And for a real treat, you can sprout a bit of sunflower seed, the black oil kind, or a handful of field peas, and mix that in for extra richness. But for a man starting out, I will tell you plain, begin with barley or wheat. Get one of those 2 right first, and then play with the others once you have the knack. And here is one caution that will save you grief. Whatever grain you buy, it must be whole and it must be alive. B. Seed that has been rolled, cracked, steamed, or heat treated will not sprout. It is dead. So you do not want rolled oats or cracked corn or any processed feed. You want whole, raw grain fit to plant. If you can plant it, it will sprout. If it has been cooked or crushed, it will only rot. Now let me walk you through the doing of it slow and in order, the way I would show you if you were standing here at my bench. It is genuinely simple, and the whole of it takes you maybe 10 minutes of hands-on work a day, spread across a couple of minutes here and there. The first step is the soak. You measure out your grain, and for a start, I would say begin small, a couple of cups of dry barley, so you learn on a small batch before you scale up. You put that grain in a bucket or a bowl and you cover it with plenty of clean water, 2 or 3 times as much water as grain, because it is going to swell up and drink a lot. Some folks put a small splash of ordinary household bleach or a little food-grade hydrogen peroxide in that first soak water, maybe a tablespoon to the gallon, and I will tell you why. It knocks back the mold spores that ride in on the grain before they ever get a chance to take hold. It is not strictly needed if your grain is clean and your habits are good, but for a beginner, it is cheap insurance against the one thing most likely to ruin your first tray. You let the grain soak like that for somewhere between 8 and 12 hours. Overnight is the natural way. You set it to soak after supper and you deal with it in the morning. The second step is the trays. While your grain has been soaking, you have got your growing trays ready. These can be anything shallow that holds a thin layer of grain and lets water drain away, and that draining is the whole secret, so hear me. You want trays with small holes in the bottom so that every time you water them, the water runs right through and out and does not sit and pool. Standing water is death to fodder. It is what breeds the mold and rots the roots. You can buy proper fodder trays, or you can take cheap plastic boot trays, cafeteria trays, or even old baking pans and drill a row of small holes along one end, then prop that end a little lower so the water runs off. Whatever you use, it must drain. Now you take your soaked grain, drained of its soak water, and you spread it in the tray in a thin layer. This is the mistake nearly everyone makes the first time, so I'm going to say it plain. Spread it thin, no more than about 1/2 inch deep, a little bed of grain, just a couple of kernels thick. Your instinct is to pile it in deep to grow more, and if you do that, the grain in the middle cannot breathe. It stays wet and packed, and it molds and sours on you. A thin layer breathes, drains, and roots down into a healthy mat. Thin trays, seated light, will beat a thick-packed tray every time. The third step, and the one you do every day, is the rinse. 2 or 3 times a day, you pour clean water over your trays and let it drain right through. That is it. morning, midday if you can, and evening. The rinse does two jobs. It keeps the grain and the young roots moist so they keep growing, and it washes away any staleness and keeps things sweet and fresh so the mold cannot get a foothold. If you can only manage twice a day, morning and night, you will still get fodder, but 2 or 3 times is better. Water, drain, walk away. That is the daily work, and it is the whole of it. Now, the light, because this is what makes fodder such a blessing for a man with no land and no glass house. For the first 3 or 4 days, your grain does not want light at all. It is busy sprouting roots and swelling, and it will do that in the dark just fine in a cupboard, under a bench, anywhere. Then around day 4 or 5, when the little green shoots come up, they want some light to green up properly, to turn from pale yellow to a good rich green. But, and this is the wonder of it, they want almost nothing. Ordinary daylight from a window, ordinary light in a room, a dim corner of the barn, all of that is plenty. You do not need direct sun. In fact, direct hot sun through glass can cook a tray and dry it out. What the fodder wants is gentle, indirect light, the kind you have in almost any room of your house or any barn with a window. That is why this works for the fellow in a flat with no yard, or the homesteader whose winter days are gray and short. A little light is all it asks. And the fourth thing to mind is warmth. Fodder grows best in ordinary comfortable room temperatures, somewhere around 60 to 70 degrees. If it is much colder than that, your grain will sprout slow and sulk, and it grows more prone to mold sitting wet in the cold. Much hotter, and it can sour. So you keep your trays somewhere that stays a decent even temperature, the same kind of place a person is comfortable, a heated mud room, a corner of the kitchen, a shop with a wood stove, the warm end of the barn. Keep it comfortable and keep the air moving a little. A stuffy, dead air corner grows more mold than an airy one, and that is the whole method. Soak overnight, spread thin in a draining tray, rinse 2 or 3 times a day, give it gentle light from day 4, keep it comfortable and airy, and in 6 or 7 days you lift out a thick green mat, roots and all, and you carry it to your animals. Now, I promised you I would be honest about the mold, because it is the one thing that defeats most beginners, and once you understand it, you will beat it every time. Mold grows in fodder for a few plain reasons, and every one of them has a plain fix. It grows when the tray does not drain and the water sits, so you fix that with holes and a tilt. It grows when the grain is spread too thick and packed and cannot breathe, so you fix that by spreading thin. It grows when the air is dead and stale, so you fix that with a little airflow, a cracked window, or a small fan across the room. It grows when you skip your rinses and let things go stale and dry, so you fix that by keeping to your 2 or 3 rinses a day. And it grows when your grain came in dirty, so you fix that with a clean soak and that little splash of peroxide or bleach at the start. Do those things and you will grow clean, sweet fodder tray after tray. Now hear me, there is a difference between mold, which is fuzzy and gray or black, grows on top and smells foul, and the white root hairs, which are fine and white and fuzzy looking down in the mat and are perfectly healthy and normal. Many a beginner has thrown out a perfectly good tray thinking the white root fuzz was mold. Root hairs are white, fine, and only around the roots, and they smell sweet and grassy. Mold is gray, black, or blue, sits on top, spreads in patches, and smells bad. Learn the difference and you will not waste a good tray. Now, who eats this and how do you feed it? Near enough every animal on the place will take fodder and thrive on it. Chickens love it, and it brings the yolks up a deep orange and helps keep the hens laying through the short days when they would otherwise slack off. Goats and sheep go mad for it. Dairy cows and beef cattle take it well, and it is easy on their rumen. Rabbits do beautifully on it. Pigs will clean it up. Horses enjoy a flake of it as a fresh treat. You feed it simply, you lift the whole mat out of the tray, and you either lay it down whole for them to tear at, roots and grass together which they love, or you tear it into chunks. They eat the whole of it. the green grass, the white roots, the little seeds still attached, all of it is good feed. Nothing is wasted. You start them on a little at a time, as you would with any new feed, and work them up over a week or so their bellies get used to the fresh green, and then you feed it as a daily part of their ration. Now here's the honest word, and I will not skip it, because this is where the internet leads folks astray, and I will not be part of it. Fodder is not magic, and it does not make feed out of nothing. That 6 or 7 pounds you grew from 1 pound of grain, a great deal of that new weight is water. Fresh fodder is somewhere around 80 to 85 parts in 100 water. So when you hear a man say he turned 1 pound of feed into 7 pounds of feed, understand what really happened. He turned 1 pound of dry feed into a bit less than a pound of dry feed with a great deal of water and fresh green growth wrapped around it. In the sprouting, the seed actually burns up a little of its own starch to grow. So if you dried that fodder back out, you would have slightly less dry matter than you started with, not more. You do not get more energy or more protein out of the deal by the weight of the dry matter. Anybody who tells you that you are magically multiplying your feed and can throw away your hay bill is selling you a dream. So what do you actually get if not free feed out of thin air? You get several things that are worth a great deal, and I will tell you them plain. You get fresh, living green feed in the dead of winter when there is no other green to be had. And that freshness, those live vitamins and enzymes, and that easy digestibility does real good for an animal that has been on nothing but dry hay and grain for months. You get feed that is far easier to digest, so the animal draws more good out of it. You get a way to stretch expensive grain by turning part of it into a bulky, fresh feed your animals relish. You get better coats, better laying, better health through the hard months, and you get all of that on a shelf with no land, no soil, and no sun. That is the honest picture. Fodder is not a way to feed your animals for free. It is a way to give them fresh, living green feed all winter long, cheaply, in no space at all. And that is worth plenty, but know it for what it is. Let me give you a couple more honest cautions so your first trays go well. Do not feed moldy fodder ever, not to any animal. If a tray molds, it goes on the compost, not in the trough. Mold can make an animal sick. Do not let the fodder grow too long either. 6 to 8 days is the sweet spot, past that it starts to use itself up and lose value, and it is more prone to going off. Feed it at day 7 or so at its green peak. And when you scale up from your first little trays to feeding the whole flock or herd, you do it with a simple rack of shelves, 1 tray started each day so that something is always coming ripe. A little rotation where you soak a batch every evening and cut a ripe tray every morning, and that steady wheel keeps fresh green feed coming every single day of the winter. Now I want to take a moment because this is the part that matters, and it is bigger than a tray of grass. Think about what you're told when it comes to feeding animals through the winter. You're told to buy the bag after bag of mill feed, hauled home and paid for all winter long, and pellets that promise this vitamin and that supplement all mixed in, the same vitamins that grow for pennies in a sprouting tray. There's a whole industry built on selling you your animal's feed in a bag forever, every month, for as long as you keep a single hen. And there is good money in that bag, and there is no money at all in telling a man he can take cheap whole grain and sprout half his winter greens on a shelf in his shed for the cost of a little water. Nobody can put a brand on a sprouting tray. Nobody can sell you a monthly subscription to something you grow yourself in a boot tray by the window. So it does not get advertised, and it does not get taught. And a whole world of folks who keep a few animals never learns that the fresh green feed their animals are starving for all winter is 7 days and a handful of grain away. This is old knowledge. Long before there was a feed mill in every town, the old dairymen sprouted grain for their milk cows to keep the milk coming and the cows in flesh through the winter. The men who kept fine horses sprouted grain to keep a shine on a coat and a spring in a step when there was no pasture. It was common knowledge on careful farms, and then the bagged feed came, easy and always there, and folks forgot they had ever done otherwise. My people never fully let it go, because we have always believed a man ought to be able to feed his own animals from his own hands and his own work, and not be at the mercy of a mill and a truck and a bill. An animal you can feed yourself is an animal no shortage and no price and no closed store can take from you. So here's what I want you to do this week. Go to the feed mill and buy a small bag of whole barley or whole wheat, the raw kind that will still sprout, and ask them plain whether it will germinate. Get yourself a shallow tray or two and drill some drainage holes in one end. Tonight, put 2 cups of that grain to soak overnight in clean water with a small splash of peroxide. In the morning, drain it, spread it thin in your tray, set it in a comfortable corner with a little light, and rinse it 2 or 3 times a day. And in 7 days, lift out your first green mat and carry it to your hens or your goats and watch them go after it. Start small, learn the feel of it, learn to tell root hair from mold, and once you have grown 1 good tray, you will never look at a bag of feed quite the same way again. Tell me in the comments below, what animals are you feeding and what does a winter's worth of feed cost you now? The chickens, the goats, the rabbits, the cows. And once you have grown your first tray, come back and tell me how it went, what grain you used and how thick it grew. Because the folks who try these things and report back teach the new folks more than I ever could. I read every single one. Next time, since we have been speaking of feeding animals through the winter, I am going to show you the old way my family puts up and stores whole grain so it keeps sweet and alive for years without spoiling or drawing weevils. The cool, the dry, the covered bin, the way it was kept before there was a bag with a date stamped on it. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, soak your grain, rinse your trays, and remember the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.